To start things off, we'll consider, even as we think about the value of variety, the power of focus with James Richardson of the Hartman Group. We're honored to have Dr. Richardson here to kick things off today. It's an awesome indication that the established powers of the food and beverage industry are looking to entrepreneurs as the keys to growth. The Hartman Group has long been a strategic advisor to some of the largest retailers and suppliers in CPG. So the fact that they're turning their gaze to this audience, it's a good sign. Dr. Richardson recently developed a go-to-market playbook to help emerging premium brands accelerate growth without losing their authenticity. In doing so, he's aligned Hartman with the premium food and beverage marketplace and how it's disrupting CPG and retail businesses. He's brought this new, valuable set of strategic insights to share with us today. So it's my pleasure to welcome James Richardson.
Can I see some hands for all the folks who attended the boot camp yesterday? Excellent. Kudos to you guys for taking a Sunday out of your life to invest in your business. Now, I bet, for those of you who attended, that your head is swirling with all sorts of tips, new advice, new directions. Maybe you want to take your business, maybe new products, new tactics. That's why I'm here today, this morning, to talk about one thing, and that's focus. I'm going to show you a photograph, and then I'm going to tell you a brief little story about how it was made. I took this on the west coast of Washington State, my home state. It's an Olympic National Park. I'm wandering up and down the beach in a candy store for photographers, because everywhere you look, there's something to photograph. That's amazing. But I had to pick something because I had to get a shot to justify why I took the weekend off from my wife. And I start walking around and I see the sea foam. That's what you see swirling in the foreground there. And I noticed it was starting to spiral in certain places, and I said, wow, it'd be great to take a photograph of what it's like to be a rock during the tide. And I plunk my tripod down in the seawater, and I start to get to work. Here's what happened. I'm standing in 2 feet of seawater. The ocean temp's about 40 degrees. I'm in uninsulated wading boots. Really bad idea. Air temperature is about 45. This is typical on the Washington coast. 20 to 25 mile an hour wind gusts, and I have a mountaineering jacket. That's a good idea. In the foreground, you can see the eddies in the photograph. I'm guessing, based on being there already for an hour, they're only going to last another 10 minutes, so that's my window. I start taking 5 to 7 second exposures to see what's going to create the cool swirl that I want. But then I notice the tripod starts shifting. Every 60 to 90 seconds, the tide starts moving the tripod. This is a hyperfocal distance photograph, so I'm only about 2 feet from that rock. So every 3 millimeters, I'm going to get a blur on that rock. So I have to keep taking the picture again and again and again and again. Then the sun starts to come up behind me while I'm doing that and flaring off my filters, creating a red cast on the left side. So I put my hand up to block that. I got my wireless trigger in my right hand, sort of like this. And then I start having massive heartburn. 85 shots to take the picture that you saw. In photography, composition's your foundation. If you do not pick a nice composition and hold it obsessively, you can't manage all the other technical variables to get a great photograph, to make the image you want to make. In food, product is your foundation. If you do not obsess about your product, you will have no mental attention to manage all the other hundreds and hundreds of variables necessary to win in probably the most competitive marketplace you could imagine, which is NOSH. Because all the investors want in, everybody with a little extra cash wants to quit their day job and join in. It's crazy out there. So let's look at a real food product case from Manhattan, New York. Siggi's yogurt. I didn't pick it because it's new. I pick it because it's a case study of obsessive focus. And yes, it might help to be a management consultant, because they're very good at that. Siggi stumbled on something authentically. He realized at some point in the early 2000s that Americans actually don't eat yogurt when they buy yogurt at the grocery store. They eat dairy candy. So his proposition was, look, I grew up eating skyr, and the stuff isn't sweet. It's so sour that you basically screw up your face until you get used to it. So why don't I offer this to America and see? Look, everybody's trying to cut out sugar from their liquid diet. Why don't I offer this in yogurt to see what happens? I love it. The average 6-ounce yogurt cup in the United States in 2006, when he started the business, had 27 to 45 grams of sugar in it. On the high end, that's about as much as a 12-ounce can of soda. It's sweet, right? So that's your baseline sensory expectation. So how are you going to sell a low-sugar yogurt that doesn't have any sweetness in it when that's the baseline? Well, you're going to be patient, that's for sure. And you're not going to get distracted by all the people who don't like it, which will be most of the people who buy yogurt. What he did was he resolved a trade-off that was already appearing amongst what we at the Harvard Group call progressive consumers. And this is a trade-off in yogurt between seeking low sugar, literally, on the nutrition facts panel, without having to have artificial sweeteners and flavors make up for the gap, which was already on the market for 30 years. That was your solution. Siggi had an audience. He had a very small audience. It happened to be incubating in Manhattan at that time and in other cities in the United States. And he just went with it. But Siggi didn't just say, there's a little market research need gap and I will fill it. He said, I want people to like skyr and I want them to like it the way that I like it. I want to sell this to the people who get it. And if you don't get it, that's fine. Just wait, you'll get it later. Right? That's the patience. But he asked the consumer of his product to make a change. He said, you want this? Then get ready to pucker up because this is sour. And if you can't handle that, then you probably shouldn't buy my product. That's the implicit ask. You really had to be willing to not eat sweet yogurt. What we found in the last 5 to 7 years in large studies of early stage NOSH brands, and from our 20 years of consumer research in this sector, is that intelligent disruption at the product level has the following components. It has to solve an existing trade-off at the merchandising category level, because yes, that is how the human being shops. They shop in merchandising categories, not defined by Nielsen, but defined by food culture. They go to the store and they're looking for yogurt. They go to the yogurt section. It is that simple, in a sense. Easy to overanalyze. The trade-off has to be embedded, it has to exist at the category level. It doesn't exist at the store level. People aren't that grandiose about their foodways. They really aren't. Well, some people are, but not most people. That solution has to be offering a modern way to seek a mainstream food benefit. Now, that doesn't sound cool. That sounds boring, right? And this is where the rubber meets the road in food innovation in this marketplace, is that there is such a thing as too cool for school. I call it too cool for growth, right? I got to have a balance. So this little matrix, I'm not going to go through it. If you want to learn about it, you can come talk to me later. It's our tool that we developed with a random quantitative sample of 900 NOSH brands last year, where we were trying to isolate statistically the variables that best predict what gives you above average growth in the near term, medium term, and long term. And these are brands anywhere from $250,000 to $100 million in the sample. And what we found was it's basically specific combinations of product disruption at the category level, and I'm talking nitty-gritty design attributes, yes, just like the graphic designer. That's how detailed it is, and that's how detailed Siggi's was. And how many mainstream food benefits you can attach to your product. Some of that's driven by your category, some of it's driven by how intelligently you disrupted your category. And thirdly, just enough technical or sensory disruption so that the VC-backed peer of yours can't chase you easily, because they don't quite know how you did it. And believe me, there are tons of technical disruptions that require absolutely no chemical processing in natural foods. And I'm sure some of you have heard about those case studies. Kind Bar has many of them embedded in its product. And many businesses actually rely on those. It actually takes a lot of work to figure out how to create a medium-term shelf life product that's 100% natural, that's going to taste exactly like it did when it left the factory. So you want to have that kind of sensory, technical sort of what I call insulation. Ultimately, where we found in our study brands receiving from the marketplace the fastest growth tended to be in this innovative box. They had connections to multiple mainstream benefits, but they also had something that was extremely disruptive, usually more than 2 or 3 attributes that were highly disruptive in the category and therefore asked a lot of the consumer. So let me break down the difference between innovative and obscure, because on that chart I just showed you, that's the difference between rapid growth, attracting lots of VC money and attention, and stagnating, spiraling, and wondering why you quit your day job. Obscure. Obscure is a product whose marketing or its implicit symbolic dynamics based on how it's designed has a benefit that's not being pushed by any major messengers or influencers, celebrities, you name it. I'm not talking about your local naturopath who knows 300 people. I'm talking about Dr. Oz and the people like that who reach millions, or at least hundreds of thousands. And yes, it could be a blog star. But those are minor celebrities, right? If they're not talking about the benefit, you are going to have very long conversations at your sampling station, right? Now, I know people who have done this. They are super patient. So just know that. That's the price of obscurity, is that you can't even explain why you should have this versus the other brand. The other thing that tends to make products really obscure is that the ingredients or the attributes you've put into the product are completely new to American food culture. And this particular issue we see a lot. It is the too cool for school trap. And you see a lot of it in terms of folks who are trying to be at the cutting edge of the category, and they're essentially 15 to 20 years ahead of the market. That's fine if you have that kind of patience. If you don't, you might want to reassess what your product is. Here's some examples of obscure. Anti-inflammatory wellness bars. Now, we all know that anybody can sell a bar, right? Yeah, they all grow. They all grow. A lot of them take off. If you have the right playbook, you'll get it to $1 million. And then it'll stagnate. I can't tell you how many bars in the POS data are just sitting there going like this, at 5 million, 3 million, 2 million. And the reason some of them are doing that is because, like the anti-inflammatory wellness bar, there's no way to communicate what that benefit is for and why you should get it from a bar very quickly to a substantial group of people. Biodynamic anything. If anybody here can explain to me in 2 sentences what biodynamic is, I'll buy you dinner tonight. Just come up after, I'll be sitting over there, come up and find me. Adaptogenic healing foods. At BevNet, you're going to hear a lot about adaptogens because there's some serious venture capital money pushing adaptogenic beverages. It just entered beverages in brands that aren't even selling $50 million yet. Is it time to push it into bars and flour? I don't know. Seems a little early, right? Innovative. This is where you want to be if you want to grow really fast. And some of you may not want to. I recognize that. You have to connect to existing mainstream benefits. You have to be willing to embrace the uncool. Heart health, weight management. A little more cool would be digestive health, really hard to talk about. Ingredients and attributes for innovative products might be new to the category. In fact, they should be new to the category, so you have market advantage, but they're not going to be new to food culture. Siggi's did not invent the idea of low sugar ingestion. He didn't. It had been around for 40 years in diet soda. It was moving into the implicit behavioral reduction of candy consumption. So he already had, especially in Manhattan, he already was seeing in his social network people ratcheting down sugar in 2006. He just had to bring it to yogurt, where it inexplicably had not arrived without aspartame and a bunch of other chemicals. So here are examples of fast-growing brands that were innovative and followed those rules. The payoff for tight product focus is this beautiful curve right here, which I like to take credit for finding, but I didn't. Our analysts sort of were mapping curves out of a random data set, and this is the machine learning essentially pulled this one right out. It's actually nothing new to mathematicians, it's nothing new to business people, but from the perspective of those of us who work in the CPG industry primarily, it was an absolute revelation, because this is a non-linear curve, folks. You can imagine my 9-year-old son skateboarding right up this thing because that's what he does on his weekends. Non-linear growth is what you want. You can find it in the data. Even if you have $1 million in sales, you can find whether or not you're on it or not. That's your proof that you have consumer pull, that you have a business being driven by food culture, not by marketing money. Now, you're going to drive the business with marketing money once you take off, because that's what you got to run with it once you find that it's going. But that's the curve you want to be on, and that's the curve that Siggi's is on. And they've been on it for about 7 years. In this kind of nonlinear growth, the product is sneaking up on the market. The guy who's at 5 million doing this isn't sneaking up on anybody. He probably has the wrong product, or he doesn't know how to market, or there might be some other problem. But the product that's doing this is sneaking up. And who is it sneaking up on? Obviously sneaking up on the incumbents. And we've been watching this happen again and again and again after recession. It wasn't just Chobani. Chobani was not a unicorn. Chobani was a unicorn in terms of the scale that it achieved, but nonlinear skate ramp growth, I can show you 100 to 200 brands right now doing this. Not all of them actually have investor money, which is kind of interesting. You'd be shocked. CPG product development cycles, minimum 3 years, often 5. Stage gate, legal, regulatory, packaging check. By the time they notice something like Siggi's, around 2014 would be maybe one of their progressive market analysts says, man, that thing just grew 100% last year. What's going on with that? Oops, 3 years, that's 2017. They're already $100 million by the time you can get your product on the shelf. Now you have a real problem on your hands. Because the retail trade doesn't want the innovation from you. So they're not going to cut you much slack, so you better pay a lot in slotting to get that thing in. And this is how entrepreneurs mess with the CPG business model. They sneak up on it. This curve has been statistically correlated in our analysis to brands that grow double-digit well past $100 million. Now, there are only about 85 to 100 businesses in the grocery store in the United States that are nosh brands from a quality perspective that are growing, that are at or above 100 million in all outlet sales. So we are, and nobody else can do a statistical analysis on that group. But we can forecast where the businesses are going to go with a larger sample of smaller early stage brands. So it's not just Siggi's, folks. Here's just 4 of the 100 or 150 skate ramp brands that we've seen in data in the last 4 years. And now they're growing at different rates, but they're all growing with nonlinear curves. And I would add, although I don't have the ability to walk you through it all, they are not growing through rapid, explosive distribution increases. And that's your proof that it's an organic, consumer-led growth engine, which is what you must prove to yourself, really, because that gives you the confidence that you actually picked the right composition in your category, and you took the right photograph, and you're going to feed it to America. You'll notice that this is not just snacks. It's not just the usual suspect categories either. Yeah, we got bars, produce. I can't tell you the number of skate ramp packaged produce brands being pushed out by farms all over the United States with zero marketing dollars. Now, they have one thing that no one else has. The produce department has the largest number of eyeballs in any department in a grocery store. So they have a little traffic on their side. But people are actually looking for innovation in produce. They're looking for it in things like spices. How do I have cilantro ready to go to put in my taco sauce or in my taco when I can't keep cilantro fresh for more than 36 hours, especially organic? Focusing your product, as you're starting to probably sense, is about having one operating category. And now I'm going to start to get really controversial. Look at these brands down below. One of them is about $800 million. Now, it's not $800 million in one operating category, but it got to $100 million in one operating category. So hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to it. The reason that and I am beating this drum, is not because I have some liberal arts agenda about focus. The math supports it, and very few people have done the math. We looked at a set of 1,700 brands, early stage brands. We wanted to look at NOSH and non-NOSH, just for the sake of statistical validation, but it also included 700 NOSH brands. These brands are selling at $1 million to $100 million. And that's the early stage sort of window of your average CPG person, although most of them aren't looking down at $1 million yet. What you see here on the green line is the benefit in terms of compound annual growth rate when you have one operating category. And the most important thing about that curve that you need to take away with is the fact that it never declines. That is this is a predictive model, so that's the predicted average compound annual growth rate for a brand with a single operating category. That includes brands which had horrible go-to-market playbooks and amazing go-to-market playbooks. No marketing, tons of marketing. That's your compound annual growth rate trajectory. I can tell you, since I've advised several large CPG companies and beverage companies, that is what they want to see as the brand is going to $100 million, because if they buy it at 30, that's definitely what they want. Now, I realize that some of you may not care about getting 35% CAGR versus 22%. It's a little academic. But if you're exiting, it's not. If you can put the argument together that you're more likely going to be on that, I can tell you that you're going to get a lot more attention from strategics. Because I work with these guys, and they don't sleep a lot at night with these brands because they're not sure they're getting their ROIC. And they're not sure, and they're often finding that it's going to take many more years than they had forecast when they signed the deal. So the more that they can believe that this thing is going to sustain mid to high double-digit growth, at least double-digit growth after $100 million, which is what that green line sort of suggests, they're going to be a lot happier in buying your company or investing in you. The other thing to think about is when you have more than one category, you can see that in the early phases, there isn't a drastic penalty, right? It's a difference in compound annual growth. The really scary thing for the strategics should be how that compound annual growth rate starts to tank once it gets to the critical threshold at which they take a brand seriously, and that's $100 million, when they might start to assign management team to it. That would terrify me if I was the 40-year-old brand manager being told to take this little NOSH brand and I see the CAGR tanking. The focal inflection point, to strike our theme once again, is about $3 to $5 million. At that point, you start to see a growth benefit for essentially selling in one operating category. By the time you get to $50 million, it's about an 8% gap, but by the time you get to $100 million, it's a 22% CAGR gap. This turns in, I mean, you guys are investors, right? At least theoretically. Literally or theoretically, that's a huge difference in return over the long term. So in terms of profits, it makes a big difference to strategics, because that's how they look at the value of the deal after the fact. The other thing that focus gives you is that it helps you overcome the early stage doldrums. This is the revenue stages that we've modeled in a random sample of NOSH brands. In the phase, what we call phase 3, between $7 and $35 million, there's a big slowdown in growth. We call it the doldrums, but basically what it is, a whole bunch of brands start stagnating. And there are many reasons for that. But one way you can better ensure that you won't get caught in those doldrums is to be a single operating focused brand. And then you better your odds of being in the green slice. Focus, we've found in the data, in working with entrepreneurs, and in studying hundreds of case studies, it unleashes business potential. Here's a photograph with no subject. It has two subjects. There's this dude, and then there's amazing scenery. This is a classic photographic mistake. They didn't know what they wanted to photograph. It's the food entrepreneur equivalent is running through Whole Foods, making a quick decision about what category to go in, and saying, boom, it'll be that, right? You don't need to hire a consultancy to figure it out, but you do want to spend a serious amount of time, just like Ziggy. Or you could take a photograph like this. Technically professional. It's very complicated to remove every shadow from a human face in a studio, believe me. It's not that easy. But it's really boring. So this is the equivalent of a well-funded brand with nothing innovative to say, with a great playbook, lots of VC money. We'll see what happens. Or you could create art. The reason that you want to focus and hold that focus obsessively, in this case, in food on the product, is that it's the only way to free up your brain cognitively and manage all the other aspects of your business. And I can't tell you how many, we advise entrepreneurs on a pro bono basis quite regularly, and that's the number one mistake we see, is people growing the business well past $1 million and they aren't managing the business holistically. Let's look at two extreme examples in the Nosh marketplace right now. And they're brands that many of you probably have not heard of. One is Wholesome Goodness. $2 to $3 million, it's in 15 operating categories. Snack mix, tortilla, and potato chips are the three biggies. And it's declining double digits. I can't tell you how many brands I see in 5+ operating categories that have a pie chart that looks like that. In almost every single case, after the second or third category, the slices just become minuscule. The incremental revenue game is like adding another flavor of Doritos to the shelf. Tiny. If you're a big CPG company, you know how to harness those tiny incremental slices through your distribution system and your sales team, and you can manage your business that way. As an entrepreneur with no staff, it's suicide. Texas Tamale is selling gourmet tamales. I'm not going to pass judgment. I'm assuming they taste great. They have 213% growth over the last 4 years. That's $7 million in one food category, and they're shipping it frozen. You can buy right now on the internet with a credit card. Focused. Now, I'll let out a little secret. In Houston, they let out some hot sauces and some dips and some salsa in the Nielsen data. Consumer doesn't want that. You're a tamale brand. Give me my tamales. Run with the consumer. In an early stage brand, they will utterly define you. They want you to be a category expert. Be the category expert. Don't try to become a private label brand. You don't want to take on the private label brand because it's your customer. They always win. They'll take your idea and they'll put it in their private label program. Highly focused product lines are fundamentally much, much easier to produce, sell, and market. If you are operating in 6 categories, this is what holistic business management is going to look like to you. You got 6 versions of the 4 Ps that you better manage if you want to maximize your growth and your success. Are you really going to do that with 2 to 3 people? I don't think so. What's going to happen, and I've seen it because I work with some of these guys, what happens is you focus really hard on the original category and maybe the one mom likes, but then the other 4, it just sort of falls apart, right? You let your distributor deal with it, your co-packer deals with it, but you're not managing a promotional plan against it. You're not doing all the other Ps. You're not really diving in to consumer outreach for 6 categories. No. In fact, your marketing message is going to get blander and blander and blander and so diluted that you wind up with Wholesome Goodness. That was a great trademark for 1985. Not in 2017. Texas Tamales sounds real. Now, they took a big gamble because they're probably not going to get any VC money because they put the category name in their brand. And so they can't sell it to a strategic as a platformable asset. I think they don't care, probably. But if you do care about exiting to a strategic, you probably don't want a category name in your trademark. That's about all you need to do to please them. This is what focus looks like. You can actually, especially if you're obsessed on the product and you hold the product, you can actually focus on all these other variables. So I just want to briefly go through what we've discovered to be the cascading benefits of ruthless product focus, working with people in this space. It makes you a category expert in the eyes of the trade. And I can't overstate the importance of this. Needless to say, retail buyers are inundated with phone calls, text messages, emails, meetups, stalkings, to try to get products on the shelf. And they're creating gatekeeping enterprises to prevent human contact with an entrepreneur so they can control it better. They are going to implicitly trust you if you're adding something of value that they can't do in their own private label production network. And that's usually what you'll have if you think about it as obsessively as Daniel Lubetzky and Ziggy did. If you create that really interesting, way ahead of its time, or slightly ahead of its time innovation. It makes you an expert in the eyes of consumers, which is very important because you're not going to be spending marketing money in the first $1 million, most likely. You need your consumer to be psycho gonzo about your product and telling all their friends. That's how you're going to get, they are your marketers, that's how you're going to get that early growth. Product focus encourages you to create unique sensory experiences because you thought about it enough. And technical disruptions because you thought about it enough so someone can't chase you. It also permits higher unit pricing and a conversation that leads to it with your buyer and your distributor because it's going to be hard to deny that you have something really cool. Not obscure, but innovative. It also allows you to engage in simple integrated marketing campaigns. It allows you to tell a tight and meaningful innovation story. In fact, it could be the same story for your buyer, your customer, your buyer, your consumer, your mother, your internal meetings. That's what you want. It simplifies merchandising decisions. It simplifies the measurement of your marketing ROI, which you should be doing even with social media. If you have 5 categories, you don't know what was causing the lift with a diluted brand message. But if your brand message is category specific, you do. Placement, the final P, the one that most people have no control over until they get real scale with their distributors and brokers. It frees you up to engage in fine-tuned price pack architecture, focusing on the UPCs that you have. Why do you have each one? What's its role? It allows you to have a minimal sales staff, optimize your UPC mix with every single channel and buyer that you're working with. So I want to leave you with a parting thought. And I think it's going to happen today. Focus attracts a lot of attention, investors, and loads of advice, unsolicited advice, the best kind. In order to not get distracted and lose that obsessive focus, you've got to have a filter. And I believe that filter is a word we all learned as toddlers to irritate our mothers. No. We might be a little more polite now. We'll say no, thank you. But the word no in your journey as an entrepreneur is the critical enabler of focus, just like it was for me on the beach. No, I'm going to shoot this, not the 17 other great photographs I could be doing right now. And if you focus on that word no, I guarantee you're going to have above average growth. Thank you very much.